Jack Harris stood in front of the worn-out wooden table, the piece of paper in his hands trembling slightly as he read it again. His eyes, bloodshot from sleepless nights, scanned the words. The notification from the bank was clear. Failure. To repay your debts will result in the foreclosure of your property. His heart sank. The land he had fought for, the land that had been passed down through generations of his family, was now in danger of slipping through his fingers. For years, Jack had poured every ounce of his energy into this piece of earth. The small farm in the rolling hills of Virginia had been his sanctuary, his way of life. It was more than just dirt and grass. It was the legacy of his father, and his father's father before him. To lose it now felt like losing a part of himself. The ticking of the clock in the background felt louder now, echoing in the silence of the kitchen. The house felt strangely quiet, even though his wife, Linda, was upstairs. Jack couldn't shake the feeling of isolation creeping over him. He was alone with this burden, and there was no one else to blame. He folded the letter, placed it on the table, and rubbed his face with both hands. How had things come to this? After retiring from the army, Jack had hoped to find peace, maybe even a little prosperity. But life after service hadn't been kind. The small pension he received barely covered the bills. He'd tried to make up the difference by starting a small business selling produce, but the competition was fierce, and the market was unforgiving. His debts had piled up slowly but surely, and now it was all crashing down on him. He picked up the letter again and stared at it, as if willing the words to change. But they remained the same. His thoughts were interrupted by a voice from upstairs. "Jack, you all right down there?" Linda's voice, warm and familiar, floated down the stairs. Jack knew she was worried. She had been noticing the late nights, the mood swings, the growing sense of dread hanging over him. But how could he explain it? How could he tell her that the land, the last piece of their shared dreams, was about to slip through his fingers? "Yeah, just need a minute," Jack called back, his voice strained. Linda's footsteps creaked on the stairs as she made her way down. He didn't want to worry her, but how could he keep this from her? She was the one person who had stood by him through everything, through the deployments, the injuries, and now this. Linda appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her face. "Jack, what's going on? You've been quiet all day. Is something wrong?" He wanted to lie, to say it was nothing, but the truth was already spilling out of him. "The bank, they're threatening to take the land, Linda. If we don't pay them back, it's gone, just like that." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, the room seemed to freeze. Jack had never seen her look so vulnerable, so lost. They had both known things weren't going well, but this was something else. "They can't just take it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We've worked so hard for this." "I know," Jack said, his voice low, "but I don't know what else to do. I've tried everything. The business, the loans, none of it's worked. I don't know how to fix this." Linda took a deep breath and walked toward him, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "Jack, we've been through worse, right? We'll figure something out. We always do." But Jack didn't feel so sure. He'd fought in wars, faced down life-threatening injuries, and survived the most harrowing of experiences. But none of that had prepared him for the idea of losing this land. It felt like the last connection he had to everything he had fought, for not just for his country, but for the life he wanted to build with Linda. He sighed and leaned back in his chair. "I don't know, Linda. I'm running out of options." Linda's hand tightened on his shoulder, her eyes filled with determination. "Then we'll find new options. Together." Jack wanted to believe her. He wanted to think there was a solution out there. But as the minutes passed, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the edge of losing it all. As the evening sun cast a dim light through the window, Jack felt an overwhelming wave of uncertainty. He could lose everything. The land, the home, the future they had dreamed of. And yet something inside of him refused to give up. Maybe he couldn't fix it alone, but there had to be a way to keep the land, to honor his family's legacy. He just had to find it. But little did Jack know his life was about to change in a way he could never have imagined. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The next few days passed in a haze of uncertainty. Jack's mind raced with thoughts of losing everything he had worked for. The land he cherished seemed to be slipping through his fingers, and the harder he tried to hold on, the more it felt like it was fading away. Every morning he found himself staring at the sunrise, the golden light spilling over the fields, reminding him of all the memories tied to that land. He could almost hear the echoes of his father's voice telling him about the importance of holding on to what's his, of standing firm when things seemed bleak. But no matter how much he tried to channel that strength, the weight of the situation was overwhelming. Jack had tried every possible avenue. He had met with bankers hoping for a miracle, but they were unmoved by his story. The loans, the debt, it all seemed like an immovable mountain. His small farm business had not brought in nearly enough to cover the expenses, and with the price of goods constantly fluctuating, there was no way to predict when it would get better. Even worse, the bank had started making threats. They weren't just going to take his land, they were going to sell it to the highest bidder, and that was something Jack wasn't sure he could bear. He had even tried calling in favors from some of his old army buddies, asking if they knew anyone who could help him out. But each conversation ended the same. No one had the means to assist him. They were all struggling in their own ways. Jack had served in places where life had been stripped down to survival, but this felt different. The battlefield had rules. This fight, however, seemed to have no limits. It was the 5th night after receiving the letter from the bank when Jack and Linda sat down together for dinner. She was trying to hold everything together, preparing meals, keeping up with the housework, and taking care of their 2 kids, who didn't understand why their father was so distant. Jack could see the worry in her eyes, but he didn't want to burden her with the full scope of his fears. "Jack, we need to talk," Linda said, breaking the silence. She put her fork down and looked at him with a seriousness he hadn't seen before. "I know you're trying to protect me, but we can't keep going like this. You're wearing yourself thin." Jack met her gaze, feeling the weight of her words. It wasn't just the financial strain anymore, it was the toll it was taking on their relationship. He had spent so many nights up late, trying to figure out what to do that he had neglected to connect with her like he should have. She deserved more than that. "I'm trying, Linda," he said quietly, his voice low and thick with frustration. "But every time I think I'm getting closer to a solution, it slips away. This is my fight. I can't ask for help. I can't let this land go. You wouldn't understand." Linda shook her head slowly, her eyes softening. "Jack, I understand. More than you think. I know how much this land means to you, but it doesn't mean you have to carry this burden alone. We're a team. You don't have to save us by yourself." Jack clenched his jaw, trying to hold back the wave of emotion rising in him. He had always been the protector, the one who handled everything, whether it was in the army or at home. But now, with everything crashing down around him, he felt like he was failing. "I don't know what else to do, Linda," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I've fought my whole life, and now it feels like everything is falling apart. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending that there's a way out when there isn't." Linda reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. Her touch was warm, a reminder that no matter how bad things got, they had each other. "We'll figure it out," she said softly. "We'll find a way, even if it's not the way you imagined. But you have to trust me, Jack. You can't do this alone." Jack stared at their intertwined hands for a moment, her words sinking in. She was right. He had been so focused on doing it all himself, pushing everyone away, thinking he had to carry the burden alone. But Linda wasn't just his wife. She was his partner. And if they were going to face this challenge together, he needed to start acting like it. He let out a heavy breath and nodded. "Okay, we'll figure it out together." But even as he said the words, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered, that time was running out. The bank wouldn't wait forever. The looming deadline was approaching fast, and Jack wasn't sure how much longer he could stall. The next morning, Jack took the letter from the bank and placed it in his truck. He was going to visit the local bank manager again. It was a long shot, but maybe, just maybe, he could negotiate an extension or get some help with a refinancing option. He wasn't ready to give up just yet. As he pulled out of the driveway, he glanced back at the land, the fields stretching out before him like an endless sea of memories. His father had always told him that things would get tough, but they would never stay that way. But Jack had never imagined that the fight for this land would be his toughest battle yet. The drive to the local bank felt longer than usual. Jack couldn't shake the sense of dread weighing on him, as if every mile he traveled brought him closer to a reality he wasn't ready to face. The fields, once so vibrant with life, now looked desolate from the road. The once promising small farm had become a symbol of his failing attempts to hold on to the past. As the truck's tires crunched over the gravel driveway, Jack sighed deeply, knowing that today could very well be his last chance to save it. He parked outside the bank and sat for a moment, staring at the building. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the street. He could see people coming and going, living their ordinary lives, while his was unraveling. It felt surreal. He hadn't expected it to come to this. All his plans, all his work seemed to be for nothing. After a few minutes, he pushed open the truck door and stepped out. His boots hit the pavement with a hard thud, and he walked up to the entrance of the bank, his mind running through every possible scenario. What would he say? How would he convince them to give him another chance? Inside, the cool air hit him, and he was immediately greeted by Sarah, the teller he'd known for years. She flashed a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes when she saw him. She knew why he was there. She had probably already heard the rumors from the back office. "Hey, Jack," Sarah said, her voice polite but with a hint of sympathy. "The manager's expecting you. He's in his office." "Thanks, Sarah," Jack replied, forcing a smile as he followed her to the back. The walk to the manager's office felt long, the air thick with a tension that wasn't there before. He'd been in and out of this bank so many times, each visit a small battle for something or other. But this time was different. This time, he didn't know if he'd be able to walk out with his head held high. When they reached the office, Sarah gave a polite knock and then opened the door, ushering Jack inside. Frank Matthews, the bank manager, looked up from his desk, his face a mix of professionalism and a subtle understanding. Frank had been with the bank for years, and he had seen the ups and downs of the community. But Jack's case was different. The man who had once proudly served his country was now standing before him, desperate to keep a piece of his family's history. "Jack, good to see you," Frank said, standing up and offering a handshake. His grip was firm, but Jack could feel the unspoken pity in it. "Please sit down." Jack sat across from Frank, his mind racing. The words he had prepared for this meeting felt useless now, stuck in his throat. He took a deep breath before speaking. "Frank, I know I'm behind on my payments," Jack began, trying to steady his voice. "I've been doing everything I can to make ends meet, but things haven't been going well. The farm's not making enough to cover the bills and the loans. I just can't keep up." Frank nodded, his eyes softening slightly. "I understand, Jack. But you know the rules. We've given you extensions and we've worked with you in the past, but at some point we have to make a decision. The property is valuable, and if you can't repay the loan, we'll have to put it up for foreclosure." Jack felt a knot tighten in his chest. "I can't let you do that, Frank. I've worked my whole life for this land. My father worked for it. It's all I have left." His voice cracked, but he pushed forward. "Is there anything else we can do? A new plan?" "Something that gives me a little more time," Frank sighed, looking down at his desk for a moment, then back at Jack. "I wish I could offer you more, Jack, but the bank has its rules, and we've been very generous so far. You know we can't just extend the loan without any new collateral, and frankly the value of your property has decreased. I don't see how we can keep moving forward without putting it on the market." Jack felt the floor drop out from beneath him. Every word Frank said felt like a hammer hitting him in the chest. He had no more options, no more time. It was over. The thought of someone else owning his land, making decisions about it, felt like a betrayal. The history of his family, the memories of his father teaching him how to plow those fields, would be erased. He couldn't let that happen. "I get it," Jack said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "But I'm asking you, Frank, one last chance, one more shot, please." Frank leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable. Jack, I'm sorry, but I can't do anything more. The decision's out of my hands. You've been given all the time we can offer. Jack stood up slowly, the weight of defeat settling over him like a heavy cloak. He felt like a man walking toward the edge of a cliff, knowing there was no way to stop the fall. Thanks for your time, Frank, Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. As he walked out of the office, Jack felt a sense of finality that he couldn't shake. He knew the bank's decision was final, and there was nothing more he could do. The land, his family's legacy, was slipping away, but just as he reached the front door, something strange happened. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a message that would change everything. Elon Musk. The text was short, but its implications were massive. Jack, I've heard about your situation. Let's talk. I think I can help. Jack stared at his phone screen in disbelief. Elon Musk? The name alone was enough to send a jolt of confusion through him. He had never met the man, never even thought that someone like Musk would know about his situation. What could this billionaire tech mogul possibly want with him and his small farm? Was it some kind of scam? Maybe a publicity stunt? But as Jack sat in his truck parked just outside the bank, he couldn't ignore the message. It was too direct, too personal, and something in the back of his mind told him this wasn't a joke. Let's talk, I think I can help. His heart raced as he quickly tapped the screen, typing a reply. Mr. Musk, I don't know how you know about my situation, but I'm listening. What do you have in mind? He hit send before he could second-guess himself. For a few moments, Jack just sat there, staring at the message thread, his fingers nervously tapping on the steering wheel. His phone buzzed again, this time with a new message. How about we meet at my office tomorrow? I'll send a car for you. Jack was speechless. Was this for real? Elon Musk, the man who had revolutionized industries, was offering to meet with him. The thought was almost too much to process. But after everything Jack had been through in the past few months, he realized he had nothing to lose. If this was a chance, however small, to save his farm, he would take it. He quickly typed back, "Sounds good. I'll be there." As Jack drove home that evening, the weight of the day felt different. For the first time in what seemed like forever, he allowed himself a small flicker of hope. The idea that someone like Musk could offer help felt surreal. But it was also a lifeline, something he hadn't had in a long time. When he walked through the door at home, Linda was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. She looked up as Jack entered, and for a moment, everything seemed to pause. The tension in the house had been building for weeks, but now for the first time there was a spark in his eyes that she hadn't seen in a long time. "Jack, what's going on?" she asked, her voice filled with cautious curiosity. Jack hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I just got a message from Elon Musk." Linda's eyes widened. "Elon Musk? The Elon Musk?" Jack nodded. "Yeah, he wants to meet tomorrow. He says he can help." Linda's mouth dropped open. "Help? How? Why would he want to help you? We don't even know him." "I don't know, Linda, but he says he's heard about my situation, and he thinks he can do something about it." Jack ran a hand through his hair, still trying to process what was happening. "This is crazy. I don't know what he wants, but I'm going." Linda stood still for a moment, processing the news. Jack could see the skepticism in her eyes, but there was also a glimmer of hope, the same hope that had begun to creep into his chest. "Well, we can't ignore it," she said after a beat. "This might be the chance we need. What's the worst that could happen?" Jack smiled faintly, still not sure what to make of it all. "Yeah, you're right. What do we have to lose?" Next morning, Jack woke up early. He tried to shake off the feeling of disbelief, but it was hard. After months of worrying about the future of his farm, he was now being offered a meeting with one of the wealthiest, most influential men in the world. The very thought was overwhelming. He dressed in his best shirt and jeans, trying to look professional despite his lack of sleep. When he stepped outside, a sleek black car was already waiting for him by the side of the road. He climbed into the back seat, his heart beating faster with every mile that took him farther from his home and deeper into the unknown. The drive felt long, and every minute that passed seemed to heighten his nerves. He had no idea what to expect from this meeting. Would Musk offer him a loan? Was it some sort of business deal, or was this just a way for him to get a quick media boost? Jack didn't know, but he couldn't afford to turn down the opportunity. Eventually, the car pulled up in front of a modern, high-tech building, a place that looked like something straight out of a futuristic movie. Jack couldn't help but feel out of place as he stepped out of the car. He'd spent most of his life in the quiet countryside, surrounded by fields and old barns. Now he was standing in front of a world he barely understood. A tall, well-dressed man greeted him at the door. "Mr. Harris, welcome. Mr. Musk is expecting you." He nodded, following. The man through the lobby and into an elevator that whisked him to the top floor. The walls were lined with modern art, the entire building gleaming with sophistication. It was like nothing Jack had ever seen before. When the elevator doors opened, he was ushered into a spacious office where Elon Musk stood waiting, his trademark black t-shirt and jeans casual but undeniably commanding. He offered Jack a firm handshake. "Jack, it's good to meet you. Please have a seat," Musk said, motioning toward a comfortable chair. Jack sat down, trying to remain calm. The last time he'd been in a room with someone of this caliber was when he was negotiating military contracts, but even then he had been on familiar ground. This felt like another world. "First of all, I want to say that I admire what you've done with your land. It's a rare thing to see someone so dedicated to preserving their family's legacy," Musk began. "But I know it's been tough. I've heard about your situation, and I believe there's a way I can help you out." Jack blinked, struggling to wrap his mind around what Musk was saying. "You've heard about my situation?" Musk nodded. "Yes. A few of my colleagues reached out to me about your story. And frankly, I believe in second chances. If you're open to it, I have a proposal that could give you the help you need to save your farm." Jack leaned forward, his heart racing again. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. Could this really be the solution he had been hoping for all this time? Jack sat on the edge of the chair, his hands gripped tightly together. His mind was racing, trying to process what Musk had just said. A proposal? What kind of proposal could Elon Musk, a billionaire tech mogul, offer a struggling farmer like him? Musk noticed Jack's hesitation and smiled, his gaze calm but intense, as if he was accustomed to having his ideas followed without question. But Jack wasn't in that frame of mind. Not yet. This was too important to simply accept on a whim. "Let me explain," Musk said, sitting back in his chair, the quiet hum of the office's high-tech systems in the background. "I know what it's like to face challenges, to feel like everything you've worked for is slipping through your fingers. I've been there myself. But what I've learned over the years is that the right kind of support, the right resources, can turn a situation around." Jack nodded slowly, still unsure where this conversation was going. "I've been looking into sustainable farming solutions," Musk continued, "and I think you're in a unique position to benefit from this trend. There's a huge push for green, efficient farming methods, and I'm investing in technologies that could change the game for small farms like yours." Jack blinked. Green farming. He wasn't sure what that had to do with his immediate problems, but he was listening. He had to. This was the first opportunity he had in months, maybe even years, to turn things around. Musk leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing with interest. "Yes, solar-powered irrigation, automated systems for crop monitoring, things like that. We've already implemented these in a few test locations. I want to help you upgrade your farm with these technologies, not just as a way to save it from foreclosure, but to make it more profitable long-term." Jack shook his head, still processing. "You're talking about technology, but I can barely afford my bills, let alone upgrading my entire operation." "What's the catch?" Musk smiled knowingly. "No catch, Jack. The way I see it, you have the land, the history, and the dedication. I can provide the technology and the expertise. You'll still own the farm, but you'll have access to cutting-edge tools that will make it sustainable and competitive in today's market. I'll provide the funding for the upgrades, and we can work out a repayment plan based on your farm's new income." For a moment, Jack could only stare at Musk, the offer hanging in the air like a weighty decision. He never imagined something like this, a solution that didn't just help him avoid losing the land, but could actually transform it into something more viable for the future. "But why me?" Jack finally asked, his voice shaky with the enormity of the offer. "There are thousands of farmers out there struggling. Why pick me?" Musk shrugged, his expression softening. "I've always believed that innovation can come from anywhere. It's not just about throwing money at a problem. It's about finding people who are willing to make things work. You've fought hard to keep your farm going, Jack. That determination is rare. I think it's worth backing." Jack's mind raced. On one hand, this sounded like a lifeline. On the other, it felt like a risk he couldn't afford to take. If he went ahead with Musk's plan and it failed, he'd lose everything. Not just his land, but his family's legacy. But if it worked, it could change everything. "You really think this will work?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Musk gave a small nod. "I do. You'll have my full support, but I need to know you're committed. This is a partnership. It won't be easy, but it could be the thing that saves your farm, Jack." Jack took a deep breath, looking out the window at the sprawling city below. For the first time in a long while, he felt the weight of his choices. This could be his second chance, the one he had been praying for. But was he ready to take it? Finally, he turned back to Musk, meeting his eyes. "All right, I'm in. I'll do whatever it takes." Musk's face broke into a smile. "I knew you'd, come around. We'll get started right away." The meeting didn't take long after that. Musk's team explained the specifics of the technology they would implement on Jack's farm. There would be solar panels to power the irrigation system, sensors to monitor soil health, and automated machines that could help with planting and harvesting. It all sounded like something out of a sci-fi movie, but Jack was willing to trust Musk. After all, the man had built SpaceX and Tesla. He wasn't a fool. As Jack left the building, his heart was pounding. He had signed on the dotted line, agreeing to the partnership with Musk. The car that had driven him there was waiting outside, ready to take him home. But as he slid into the back seat, a thought nagged at the back of his mind. What if it didn't work? What if, despite all the money and technology Musk was offering, the land still couldn't survive? Still, he pushed the doubts aside. For the first time in months, Jack had a glimmer of hope, and that was enough to keep him going. The next few weeks flew by in a blur. Jack's farm was transformed almost overnight. The solar panels went up quickly, and soon after, the irrigation system was up and running. The automated systems that Musk had promised started arriving in pieces, each new technology adding more efficiency to the farm's operations. Jack was busy, but the progress was undeniable. It wasn't long before he saw the first signs of improvement. The crops seemed to be growing faster, healthier thanks to the automated monitoring systems. And the costs of water and electricity, two of his biggest expenses, dropped dramatically with the solar-powered systems. But despite all the progress, Jack knew this wasn't a guarantee. The farm wasn't out of the woods yet, not by a long shot. The real test would come when harvest season arrived. Would the new systems be enough to turn the tide? But for the first time in a long time, Jack allowed himself to believe it might work. The weeks rolled on, and for the first time in what felt like ages, Jack could feel the weight on his shoulders begin to lift. With the new technology in place, and the support from Musk's team, the farm was starting to show signs of life. The crops were growing faster, the soil was healthier, and the automated systems made everything run smoother than Jack could have ever imagined. For a man who had spent years struggling just to keep his farm afloat, this was nothing short of a miracle. Yet just as things seemed to be turning around, the unexpected happened. It started with a phone call early one morning, a call that Jack would never forget. "Mr. Harris, this is Emily. I'm with the county's agricultural department. I need to talk to you about your recent changes. We've received some concerns from neighboring farms." Emily's voice was calm but firm. Jack's stomach dropped. "Concerns? What kind of concerns?" "Well," Emily hesitated, "some of the neighboring farms are worried that your new systems, especially the automated machinery and the solar irrigation, might be causing disruptions. There have been complaints about your operations affecting their land." Jack frowned, confused. "How is that possible? The systems are all contained to my land. I've checked everything multiple times." Emily's voice grew more serious. "I'm Afraid it's not just about your land. There are environmental regulations at play here. I'm going to need you to come in for a meeting. We'll have to assess everything, and there may be some adjustments that need to be made. The weight of the conversation hit Jack like a punch in the gut. He thought everything was going well. But now there was a new obstacle in his path, one that could potentially undo all the progress he had made. As he sat at his kitchen table, the phone still clutched tightly in his hand, the world around him seemed to spin. The last thing he needed right now was a legal battle, especially with the farm still hanging on by a thread. Musk had believed in him, and the last thing Jack wanted was for something to derail all of their hard work. He turned to Linda, who was sitting across from him, preparing breakfast. Her face mirrored his own concern as she listened to the conversation. "Jack, what are we going to do?" she asked, worry etched across her face. "I don't know," Jack muttered, rubbing his eyes. "This isn't just about us anymore. It's about all the other farmers who think we're taking something from them. We're stuck in the middle of this." Linda reached across the table, taking his hand. "You fought this hard, Jack. We can't let one thing ruin all the progress we've made. You've got to stand your ground." Jack nodded, but deep down he knew that standing his ground might not be enough. The pressure was mounting from every direction: local farmers, county regulators, and the looming threat of the bank. He couldn't afford another setback. The meeting with Emily was scheduled for the following week. As Jack prepared for the conversation, his mind raced through all the potential outcomes. He couldn't just let the system be shut down, not after everything he had invested. But what if the regulations were right? What if he had overstepped without even realizing it? That night, Jack barely slept. He spent hours pacing the house, weighing his options, trying to figure out how to make this work. By morning, he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't back down. Not now. Not after all he had sacrificed to keep this farm alive. The day of the meeting arrived, and Jack drove to the agricultural office with a heavy heart. The building stood in stark contrast to the rolling fields of his farm, but it was a necessary stop if he was going to clear his name and keep his farm's operations intact. He had to face the regulations head-on, no matter how daunting it seemed. Inside, Emily greeted him with a polite smile, though her eyes held a professional wariness. She ushered Jack into a conference room where several other officials sat waiting for him. The air was thick with tension as Jack sat down across from them, the weight of the entire situation pressing down on him. "We've reviewed the concerns raised by your neighbors, Mr. Harris," Emily began. "They're worried that your new farming practices could be causing unintended consequences. We've had reports of soil erosion, disruption to local water supplies, and even some complaints about the noise from your automated machinery." Jack blinked in surprise. "Noise from the machines? We've done everything to ensure they're as quiet as possible." The officials exchanged glances, one of them scribbling notes. "It's not just about noise, Mr. Harris. The noise is just one part of it. But there's also concern about the solar-powered irrigation system. Some of the runoff water is seeping into neighboring fields, and they're claiming it's affecting their crops." Jack felt a knot tighten in his stomach. This wasn't what he had expected at all. He had thought the systems were supposed to help the farm. Now it seemed like his progress was being turned against him. "I assure you, I've taken all the precautions. The irrigation system is completely contained to my property." "I don't see how there could be runoff into anyone else's land," Jack protested, frustration rising in his voice. "We'll need to inspect it in person," Emily said, her tone firm but not unkind. "But if there's any truth to these claims, we'll need to make some changes. This is a serious matter, Mr. Harris." Jack sat back in his chair, his mind whirling. This was exactly what he had feared. The idea that everything he had worked for could be torn down by regulations he had never even known existed. The weight of the situation felt crushing, but Jack knew one thing for sure. He couldn't give up. Not now. Not when he was so close. The officials agreed to schedule a full inspection of the farm the following week. As Jack left the office, he felt a strange mix of dread and determination. This wasn't just about saving his farm anymore. It was about proving that innovation could work, that he could make things right. As he drove back home, he knew the battle was far from over. But for the first time, he felt like he had the chance to fight back, to stand up for what he believed in. and that, in itself, was worth something. The following week felt like the longest of Jack's life. The countdown to the inspection was steadily ticking away, each day adding more weight to his already burdened shoulders. He couldn't shake the feeling that the entire fate of his farm was now hanging in the balance. Every piece of technology Musk had installed, every improvement they'd made, was suddenly under a magnifying glass. Would it be enough to convince the authorities that his new methods were both legal and sustainable? Linda had been a rock during these trying days, supporting Jack when he needed reassurance and helping keep the daily routines going. Still, she saw the worry in his eyes every time he looked out the window at the rows of crops, the solar panels glinting in the morning sun. The peace of the land, once soothing, now felt like a reminder of the stakes. Jack had done everything he could to prepare, double-checking the automated irrigation system, running the machinery at half speed to ensure minimal noise, and even ensuring the solar runoff was directed away from neighboring properties. Despite the growing tension, he couldn't help but hope that maybe, just maybe, the inspectors would see that he wasn't trying to be reckless. He wasn't trying to take advantage of anyone. He was just trying to save his farm. On the morning of the inspection, Jack stood at the edge of his property, his arms crossed, watching the team of county inspectors arrive. Their vehicles kicked up dust as they rolled down the long dirt road that led to the farm. There were several men and women in the group, all wearing badges and carrying clipboards, ready to scrutinize every inch of his operation. Jack took a deep breath and met them at the entrance to his property. Mr. Harris, one of the men greeted him, offering his hand. He was in his mid-40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. "I'm Aaron Thompson. We're here to conduct a full inspection of your farm's operations. Hope you're ready." "Of course," Jack said, trying to sound confident. "I've made sure everything is in line with the guidelines." "We'll see about that," Thompson replied coolly. The inspectors began with the automated systems first. They took notes on the machines, measured the noise levels, and even took photographs of the solar-powered irrigation system. Jack tried his best to remain calm as they poked and prodded, but each question they asked felt like a jab at his efforts. It was clear that they weren't just looking for technical faults, they were looking for any reason to halt the progress of his new farming methods. For hours the team walked around the farm conducting their tests. Jack couldn't escape the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. When they finally gathered at the center of the farm to discuss their findings, Jack's stomach twisted with anxiety. Aaron Thompson stood in front of the group, flipping through pages of notes. The rest of the inspectors stood silently, observing. Finally, Thompson looked up and addressed Jack. "Mr. Harris, we've completed our inspection. We've reviewed all the systems, and while there are some positive aspects, there are also a few concerns that need to be addressed before we can sign off on your operations." Jack's heart skipped a beat. "What kind of concerns?" Thompson glanced at his colleagues before continuing. "There are still some issues with water runoff, though it's not as severe as initially reported. The solar panels are effective, but they're causing some heat displacement on the crops near the edges of the field. This can stunt growth and affect the yield." Jack opened his mouth to speak, but Thompson held up a hand to silence him. "I understand that this is a difficult situation, Mr. Harris, but it's our responsibility to ensure that these new technologies don't harm the environment. That includes making sure they don't have unintended side effects on neighboring farms." Jack's thoughts were racing. He had worked so hard to implement these systems to make things work, but now the regulators were saying that some of it wasn't quite up to snuff. "How long do I have to fix these issues?" Jack asked, his voice shaky but resolute. Thompson paused for a moment, flipping through his notes again. "We'll give you 30 days to correct the problems. If you don't make the necessary adjustments by then, we'll have no choice but to revoke your operational permit." Jack felt his world tilt. 30 days? He didn't have that kind of time. The bank would be after him long before that. If he couldn't meet their demands, he could lose everything. The farm, the land, the future that Musk had helped him believe in. Linda, who had been quietly standing off to the side, stepped forward. "What kind of adjustments are we talking about? Surely there's a way to fix things without tearing everything down." Thompson glanced at her, his expression softening just slightly. "We're not asking you to tear everything down, Mrs. Harris. But we do need to see changes. Better management of the runoff, more careful placement of the solar panels, and modifications to the irrigation system to prevent any water from going beyond your property. Jack was silent for a long moment, trying to process the weight of the situation. 30 days. That was all he had. His fingers clenched into fists as he thought about the uphill battle ahead. Musk had given him the technology, but now it was up to him to figure out how to make it work within the regulations. "All right," Jack said finally, his voice tight. "We'll do whatever it takes." Thompson nodded, his tone softening slightly. "Good. I appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Harris. We'll be back in 30 days for a follow-up inspection. In the meantime, we'll be available to answer any questions you might have." With that, the inspection team left the farm, their vehicles kicking up dust as they drove away. Jack stood there, frozen, for a long time after they had gone. Linda came over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Jack, we'll figure this out. We've faced worse. We'll do what we need to do." Jack turned to look at her, his face filled with a mixture of determination and doubt. "I hope you're right, but 30 days is a short time and I can't afford to fail now." The next few days after the inspection felt like a blur. Jack had barely slept, the weight of the 30-day deadline pressing on him like an anvil on his chest. Linda, though equally worried, was there every step of the way, helping Jack stay focused on what needed to be done. They had spent countless hours brainstorming, poring over blueprints of the farm, and looking for ways to improve the systems before the inspectors came back. But no matter how many adjustments they made, no matter how many changes they implemented, the truth remained. Time was running out. The more Jack thought about the situation, the more desperate he became. The 30 days might seem like a long time to some, but for Jack, it felt like an impossible challenge. The systems he had so carefully designed, the tech that Musk had so generously provided, now seemed like a ticking time bomb that could explode at any moment. As the deadline loomed closer, Jack's thoughts often drifted to the farm's future. What would happen if he failed? What would he do if he lost everything again? The house, the farm, and even the hope that Musk had instilled in him, all of it seemed like it was slipping away. One particularly gloomy afternoon, as Jack stood by the field surveying the changes they had already made, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw that it was an unknown number. "Hello," he answered, his voice sounding more strained than he intended. "Mr. Harris?" A familiar voice responded, though Jack couldn't place it at first. "It's Elon Musk." Jack's heart skipped a beat. Elon Musk? Why was he calling? "Mr. Musk," Jack stammered, trying to keep his composure. I didn't expect to hear from you directly." Musk's voice was calm, reassuring. "I heard about the inspection and the challenges you're facing. I wanted to reach out personally. I believe in what you're doing, Jack, and I know this situation isn't easy, but I think I can help." Jack's breath caught in his chest. Help? Could Musk really fix this for him? "I don't know how much help I can be at this point," Jack replied, the desperation clear in his voice. "They've given me 30 days, and no matter how much I try, it doesn't seem like enough time to get everything right." Musk's tone didn't waver. "I know it's tough, but I've seen your progress, Jack. What you've done is remarkable, and I think I have a solution that could not only fix the immediate issues, but also take your farm to the next level." Jack felt a surge of hope, something he hadn't felt in days. "What's your solution?" Musk's voice shifted, a hint of excitement creeping in. "It's something I've been working on with my team, a new type of automated environmental monitoring system that could address the runoff issue and give you real-time data on water usage, soil health, and even crop growth. If we get this up and running, it will not only meet the regulations, but it'll give you an edge over other farms using traditional methods." Jack paused, trying to process what Musk was saying. It sounded almost too good to be true. "You can do that in 30 days? Musk chuckled. "With the resources we have, it's definitely doable. My team is already getting started on the design. We'll integrate it with your existing setup. The technology will make sure that all your systems are running at peak efficiency, and we can even get it to a point where the inspectors won't have any further issues. I'm going to send a team to your farm next week to install the system." Jack's mind was racing. This was it, the lifeline he had been waiting for. That could work, Jack said, his voice full of awe. I don't know what to say, Mr. Musk. You're really going to help me? Musk's voice softened. Jack, I'm doing this because I believe in what you're trying to do. You're taking a risk, and I admire that. Plus, you've shown that you're willing to put in the work to make this farm sustainable. It's not just about the land, it's about the future, and I want to help make sure you have one. Jack felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. Musk didn't just see him as a struggling farmer, he saw someone trying to innovate, to change the way things were done, and now it seemed like Musk was offering him the final piece of the puzzle that could save everything. Thank you, Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. You have no idea how much this means to me. Musk gave a reassuring chuckle. It's nothing, Jack. Just keep doing what you're doing. We'll take care of the rest. As Jack ended the call, a strange sense of calm washed over him. The weight of the world hadn't completely lifted, but for the first time in weeks, he could see a glimmer of hope on the horizon. Musk wasn't just giving him a temporary fix. He was helping him build something sustainable, something that could work long-term. Now, with the help of a cutting-edge system that would not only meet the regulatory requirements, but also optimize his farm's operations, Jack had a fighting chance. The following week, a team from Musk's company arrived at the farm with the new monitoring systems. They worked quickly, setting up sensors in the fields, installing software to track soil moisture, and integrating the technology into the irrigation and solar systems. Jack watched in awe as the team efficiently set everything up. Within a matter of days, his farm was transformed. When the inspectors arrived for the follow-up visit, they were visibly impressed. The new systems were running smoothly, with real-time data being displayed on a screen that showed exactly how much water was being used, how the crops were growing, and how much runoff had been diverted away from neighboring fields. The sensors ensured that the irrigation was precise, making it clear that there was no waste or environmental impact. The inspectors reviewed the data, walked the fields, and examined every aspect of the operation. After hours of inspecting, Aaron Thompson approached Jack with a nod. Mr. Harris, Thompson began, his tone more respectful than before, we've reviewed everything, and I have to say, the improvements you've made are outstanding. These new systems not only address the concerns we had before, but they go above and beyond what we expected. I'm happy to say that your farm is in compliance with all regulations. Jack's heart leaped in his chest. So, I'm clear to continue operations? Thompson smiled, a rare sight. Yes, Mr. Harris, everything looks great. You're good to go. As the inspectors left, Jack stood in the middle of his fields, the weight of the last few weeks lifting off his shoulders. It wasn't just the farm that had been saved, it was the future. With Musk's help, Jack had not only saved his land, but had set a new standard for farming innovation. He looked over at Linda, who had been standing nearby waiting for the verdict. When their eyes met, Jack couldn't help but smile, a deep, genuine smile that carried all the relief and gratitude he felt in that moment. The days that followed the inspection were filled with a mixture of triumph and reflection. The overwhelming sense of relief that Jack had once felt had now shifted to a quiet confidence. With the approval in hand, his farm was not only saved, but it was also poised to become a model of sustainable farming. His decision to embrace new technology had not only proven his resilience, but had now set him on a path toward innovation that would shape the future of agriculture. It didn't take long for word to spread about the improvements Jack had made, and soon enough other farmers started reaching out to learn more about the new systems Musk had helped him integrate. The attention wasn't just local, it began to spread across the country. Journalists were calling, asking for interviews. Environmental groups were visiting, eager to see the impact of the new technology on water conservation and soil health. Musk's name was often brought up in the discussions, and Jack found himself sharing the story of how a billionaire tech mogul had changed the course of his life. But for Jack, it wasn't just about the accolades or the attention. It was about the land he had fought so hard to protect. It was about the legacy he could now leave for his children, a farm that would be more than just a business. It would be a beacon of what was possible when technology and tradition worked hand in hand. One crisp morning, as Jack stood on the porch of his farmhouse gazing out at the expansive fields that stretched before him, Linda came up beside him with a cup of coffee in hand. The soft light of dawn painted the land in warm hues of gold, and for a brief moment, everything felt perfect. "Can you believe it?" Linda asked, her voice filled with a sense of wonder. "We did it. It's really happening." Jack took a long sip from his own cup, savoring the warmth and comfort it brought. He smiled, feeling the weight of the past few months settle into something resembling peace. "I still can't believe it, but I think this is just the beginning." Linda laughed softly, her eyes twinkling. "I think so too. But Jack, I have to say, I think this farm is more than just a survival story. It's a symbol of what's possible when you don't give up, when you fight for what you believe in." Jack nodded, watching a lone hawk soar overhead, its wings spread wide against the pale blue sky. "I never thought I'd get here, but I guess sometimes the right people come into your life at the right time. Musk didn't have to help, but he did. And now we're in a position to help others." Linda placed her hand gently on Jack's arm. "You've always been the one to lead by example, Jack. This farm, what you've done, it's all because of you." A quiet pride filled Jack's chest. He had been on the brink of losing everything, and now he stood at the helm of something greater than he had ever imagined. But in the back of his mind, he knew that this wasn't just about him. It was about the farmers who would follow in his footsteps, the ones who would look at his farm and see the potential for change. "Yeah," Jack said, his voice steady with resolve. "It's not just about us anymore. It's about creating a future that works for everyone. I'm going to make sure of that." The next week, Jack and Linda hosted a group of local farmers at the farm, eager to share their success and show others how they could replicate the same model. There were farmers from different backgrounds, some just starting out, others with decades of experience, but all of them shared a common goal: to find a way to make their operations more sustainable. Musk's technology had been the game changer, but it was Jack's leadership that had made it work. He showed them the systems in action, explaining how the sensors monitored soil health, how the irrigation was more precise than ever before, and how the data provided by the software allowed them to make real-time decisions about water usage and crop management. It wasn't just about saving his own farm anymore. It was about sharing the knowledge and helping others make the transition to more sustainable practices. The impact of the new technology was clear. Water usage had dropped significantly, crops were healthier, and the environmental impact was lower than it had ever been. As the farmers left that day, many of them approached Jack with plans to start their own upgrades. Some even asked if they could partner with him on future projects, eager to learn more about the potential of integrating technology into their farms. Jack felt a sense of pride as he watched them drive away, knowing that this was the beginning of something bigger than he could have imagined. The story of Jack Harris, the farmer who had saved his land with the help of Elon Musk's innovative technology, had become a symbol of hope for many. But it wasn't just about the technology. It was about resilience, about never giving up even when the odds seemed stacked against you. It was about the power of innovation and the importance of embracing change, even when the road ahead seemed uncertain. Jack had learned that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. And in this case, it wasn't just about saving a farm, it was about shaping the future of farming itself. As Jack sat back on his porch that evening, looking out over the fields, the weight of the last few months seemed to lift. The challenges hadn't disappeared, but the future felt bright. The farm was no longer just a place of struggle. It had become a place of hope, growth, and possibility. With the sun setting behind him, Jack knew that no matter what came next, he had the strength to face it. He had fought for his land, and now he had the power to help others do the same. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?